Hi, my name's Timmy Pham. I'm a senior at Yale, and I'm here with Adrien Weibgen, a second-year law student at Yale Law School. And we're here just to talk a little bit about her work with community organizing and queer organizing. So, first, Adrien, why don't you start with just telling me a little bit about yourself and your interests?
All right, so I'm a law student, kind of reluctantly. I'm mostly interested in racial justice work, and I also did some organizing in the queer community when I lived in New York. I intend on going back there and hope to continue doing racial justice work.
All right. So the queer organizing that you mentioned in New York, I know you played a pretty big part in the early days of starting it. It was the Queer Commons, right? So can you tell me what was the Queer Commons?
The Queer Commons was a reading and discussion group for queer people. We tried to do topics that would be interesting to people of color, to trans people, to just people of different experiences, and all of the topics were things that were both academic and personal. So we wanted to give people readings so they could relate to the ideas in that way, but then also have them be conversations that people could bring in their personal lives and experiences and share those experiences with other people. And the idea behind it was basically that there's a lot of places to meet other queers to like get a drink or to go dancing or whatever, but it's when you're not in a school setting, it's much harder to meet people with different experiences and have a substantive conversation with them. And at the time when I got involved with it, I had been out of school for 5 years or so, and so yeah, it was a really great way to meet other people and engage around different ideas.
Great. So what were some of the challenges that you faced with organizing the Queer Commons and trying to get that started?
So some of the challenges were just like logistical. A group of us started the group, and we could never get space because we didn't have any funding, and we had to do all of our own publicity because it was a new group, and we were always trying to figure out how to make the events more accessible to people. So for instance, we would put the readings online for free so that anyone could come. It was always at a free venue. Then we started to, or actually from the beginning, we would kind of explain what was in the reading at the beginning of the session, so that even if somebody was working or the article was kind of like difficult for them, because frequently they would be like academic pieces, and so people have different like educational backgrounds or different amounts of time that they could sit with the articles. So we wanted to make it accessible to people, and just trying to figure out how to do that was always a challenge. And then because the group addressed topics that were of personal significance to people, there were sometimes actually rarely outright conflicts, but like disagreements. And then particularly, we were trying to make it a group that was diverse racially and socioeconomically, and that was incredibly difficult, just because by its nature, a group that's kind of academic and sort of feels like a college class often came to be dominated and peopled by folks whose experience that was, like mainly people who had more class and or educational privilege and were able to like engage in a discussion in a college classroom type way. And then there were all sorts of race dynamics in the group as well.
So how did you get started with like reaching out? What types of media did you use? What tools did you use to try to get that racially and socioeconomically diverse group of people?
Yeah, so we worked with a lot of other queer groups, and including advertising on different people's listservs and trying to do events that were co-sponsored by other groups to bring in different people. We were also very intentional about choosing topics that address a range of interests. So one of our sessions was on racial segregation in the queer community, and that drew an enormous number of people of color. Another session was about the idea of coming out as fat, so the relationship between the coming out experience in a queer context with also people who self-identify as fat, and like how those relate to each other. And so a lot of queer fat activists came to that session, and then a number of them continue to come. So that was kind of how we tried to build it, like making ideas that could be accessible to different people, and then they would come to the session, and we hoped they would come to the next one.
Awesome. So this past semester when you were my TA, I know you took some time off and you went and did some great work at Coney Island post-Hurricane Sandy relief work. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I worked with my partner and my sister and a bunch of our friends and our mom and a lot of other people who ended up going down to Coney Island because at that time, shortly after the storm and for several weeks after that, all of the people who you would think should be doing a disaster response, so FEMA and the Red Cross and the city, or anyone who you might imagine should be running around into buildings and making sure that people had food and water and that people who were elderly and disabled or had medical needs weren't going to die. Those agencies were not there doing that, and there was no one there doing that except for other volunteers and residents themselves. So I did end up taking a bunch of time off from the law school because when we went down there, it was just scary that there weren't more people doing that work, and we ended up becoming the organizers of what became the main canvassing effort, or one of the main canvassing efforts down there, to go into buildings and identify people who were in crisis, because your heat and your elevator and your water not working was certainly like inconvenient and like terrible for everybody who was down there, but especially for elderly and disabled people was also dangerous. So we were basically coordinating hundreds of volunteers and trying to find every building that there was and making sure that every door got knocked on, and that was really hard.
During this time, I know you also got a lot of media coverage from different news sources. How was that helpful or harmful, or just how did that impact the work that you were doing?
So the general coverage of Sandy, and then particularly the coverage that Occupy Sandy got, were helpful to us because many of our volunteers came through the Occupy Sandy network, and so the more media there was about the problem of elderly and disabled people being trapped in their high-rise apartment, the more volunteers we would get who understood that that was a problem that we needed volunteers to help solve. But at the same time, when we were down there, it was incredibly frustrating that, in my opinion, many people in the media did not understand for a long time that that was the crisis that was happening then. They knew that Sandy had happened and that people were inconvenienced, or that their homes had been flooded and they were moldy, and like those are all like terrible things, and many of those things people are still dealing with now. But the level of urgency for people who are trapped in their homes, I think, was very poorly understood by most people, including the people who were writing the stories about what was happening in Sandy. So it was frustrating. We would sometimes have someone from the media come down and spend all day with us and then just put out a piece that really kind of had like nothing to do with anything. And but other times the coverage was good, and it helped to explain that story to people so they could see like how urgent the need was, but it varied a lot. So
just to wrap up, I know a lot of people, especially on Yale's campus, are trying to get more jazzed up and doing a lot of organized things with the queer people of color, organizing that we're trying to get on Facebook, and I know the People's Art Collective is trying to do like a queer youth thing. Like, what words of advice or like would you give to these groups that are trying to start organizing and doing things that they feel important?
I would say just do your best. Like that's all organizing is, just doing your best, because if there's somebody else doing it already, then you don't necessarily need to be doing that thing. But if you're starting a new thing, then you just have to keep trying different things, and listen to people that you trust, like work with a good team in whatever it is you're trying to develop. And don't be alarmed if you feel like you don't know what you're doing, because that is the norm.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Adrien. It was great talking to you.